A franchise is a business on training wheels. A franchise is a business where someone else has figured out the best way of doing business. Not all franchises, and I will repeat this, not all franchises are created equally. The goal, I think, in my opinion, is finding the right match. And once you find the right match, I believe that business is going to be much more sustainable.
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast, where you can escape the corporate trap through franchise ownership. Here's your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, the Franchise Guide.
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, your franchise guide, the show where we help corporate executives experience time and financial freedom via franchising. Thanks for joining us today. For today's conversation and show, wanted to discuss topics I get on a daily basis. And I'm sure the individuals asking the questions aren't the only ones that have, these specific questions. So wanted to share that on a show today, and hopefully I can inspire and answer the question around franchising and franchise ownership. So the question was around essentially, what is a franchise and what are the franchises out there? And so part one to that question, and I talk about this quite a bit, is that a franchise is a business on training wheels. A franchise is a business where someone else has figured out the best way of doing business. They have that business plan in place. They've executed on the business, and essentially they're looking to grow their business by duplicating it and having individual owners around the country grow that brand. And just because there's a franchise out there doesn't mean it's available in your state. Some brands grow regionally. You see brands on the East Coast as well as just on the West Coast. And maybe that's their full intention of growth. And sometimes that's where they're testing the markets and then eventually growing later. In other cases, we talked about this on a previous episode, are registration states. And maybe that brand isn't available yet in that specific state. Maybe they are relatively new and they're trying to get more of a track record in order to register in that specific state. Certain registration states, I get a lot of calls from people in Washington, as well as California, Washington State and California. So, so that's a little bit about franchising. Don't look at franchising necessarily as an industry. You have franchises in, haircuts. You have franchises around fast food and things like that. That's the industry, fast food. And then you look at the franchises within. Because franchising, I would say, yes, there's a lot of similar things going on and benefits that I talked about a couple episodes ago from key takeaways from our Cincinnati conference. So definitely encourage you to check that out a couple episodes ago. Now, when it comes to what franchises are out there, there are over 4,000 franchise companies in the U.S. alone. And it's good to know what is out there. And, Entrepreneur Magazine, Jason Pfeiffer, for example, the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, who I had on the show at the end of last year, did a really good job just talking about his experience in franchising, and that they have this year-end, or actually beginning of the year edition, where they talk about the top 500 brands and they break it down by industry. So that could be a good starting point. But, the point of my conversation is that with the internet, there's no lack of information. There are lists of brands out there. But ultimately, my whole thing and my goal for today is really to challenge your way of thinking, your challenge your way and really help you in figuring out and changing the mindset of figuring out how to find the right brand for you. Because one thing that I try to hit home on a lot of these conversations is that just because your friend, family member, or someone you knew was successful with the franchise does not mean necessarily that you are going to be successful with that franchise. Still has the same system and support, but it may not be a good match based off your personality. May not be a good match, maybe based off of where you're located in the country, the demographics and things like that you have to take into consideration. So a big part of today is that you can definitely find the list of brands out there. Some people have interest in certain industries, as I mentioned, haircutting and fast food and things like that. But I wanted you to change your approach into figuring out, what are the franchise models, big change there in mindset, franchise models that may be a good fit. And where do we start? So we start as we do all conversations. Let's figure out if a franchise may be a good fit. And really it's around having access to capital. I always say at least 50,000 liquidity, about 100,000 net worth is a good starting point. We'll get into more specifics. Being able to make a decision within 6 months on a brand, not opening, but signing an agreement. I talk about that quite a bit because why explore a brand when, it's kind of like looking at a home. You find the home you like and say, okay, I'll be back in a year to buy it. Well, that territory may not be available, specifically, or that specific location in a year. So I would say start the due diligence when you have a goal of making a decision in 6 months or less. And you're okay following systems because just like we talk about E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, the whole idea of systems, that's exactly what you're getting with the franchise. You're getting systems, and the intention is to follow the main system, to follow the marketing and everything that franchisor is providing you. So we get past, yes, okay, franchising may be a good fit. I'm not looking to reinvent the wheel. Going back to your want to make sure we have a strong enough why. Why are you doing this? What are you looking to create from this? And then we get into the kind of the meat of this call is the ideal business. How do we find the ideal business? And again, in the same industry, you're going to find multiple brands in mosquito spraying and roofing, haircuts, fast food, gyms and things like that. Not all franchises, and I will repeat this, not all franchises are created equally. Every brand, they may be in a similar industry, giving the customer or client the same service, providing the same service, but ultimately they may be run differently. These are characteristics. One franchise A in the mosquito spraying space may have you running the business full-time and spraying the backyards of people's homes. And the other one allows you running it part-time where you're overseeing the marketing, the KPIs, and just the systems in place. So, going back to these characteristics that I just talk about this all the time. It's so crucial because having a clear idea, even if you've never owned a business before, and this is where I can help, getting an idea of what that business may look like from these characteristics we're going to talk about really helps you to scale down the brands, that are going to be available in your market. So let's go through some examples of things to think about, and then we can go back and revisit and see where the match is. So, a big part of this is where you are located, location, specifically or general area. So you may live in Chicago, and maybe it's one of the suburbs in Chicago, but you have that general area. Now, a brick and mortar business, specifically, maybe it's a standalone building or in a shopping center, may say, we have room for 3 locations. So you're not really figuring out the exact spot. A third party will come in and help you there. We want to figure out the Chicago area and or the suburbs. Anything beyond that, anything beyond the center of Chicago, going back in hours is too far out. That is one way to really scale down your business, because sometimes we see ads, especially if you're doing research nowadays, and you may get retargeted. An ad may pop up and it sounds great. Obviously it's an ad, right? They're going to make it appealing, but we want to make sure that it's in a market that you're comfortable with. You're not driving 2 hours to get to work at a location or what have you. So location, I think, is a big one, and it would really, really help you scale back, the number of brands, because first off, it has to be registered in your state of Illinois. Secondly, it needs to be available in your market. So, this is something to really consider. And I encourage you to really think, hey, are we staying here for the long run, or are we thinking of moving? That's a great place to start. So if you are thinking of moving or have dual residency, or thinking of eventually moving in a year, maybe look at, where you will eventually move and see if it works within the time frames. Second piece to this is money. We need to be able to fund this franchise and not, there's this whole idea of, the money, your capital you have, but you don't want to overextend yourself. So I encourage everyone to look at their financial situation, break down, all your savings accounts, checking accounts, put all your assets together on the left side of a piece of paper, and all your liabilities. So assets are anything you own, IRAs, real estate, and that's going to be the asset's going to be the value of the home, approximate. And then there's the liability. What's the mortgage on there? Do you have any student loans, credit card debt, auto loans? Maybe you have a second property, an investment property that has a mortgage on it. Write that stuff down and you start figuring out net worth. So assets minus liabilities is your net worth. And then you're figuring out your liquidity. What access do you have to capital, your checking, savings, stock accounts, and things like that. And it provides two reasons. Number one is the franchisor will have liquidity and net worth requirements. Number two, it's good to have those numbers because I always encourage everyone, if you are leaving your job to run this business full time, you want to make sure to have some cash reserves for the business and personal expense. Everyone's situation is different, and this is where we do a little bit of a deeper dive. But if there's someone else in the home, maybe it's your spouse that is working and their income is covering the expenses, great. You want to have a little bit of a buffer there and make sure you have enough to fund the business and some reserves aside in the event the business takes a little bit longer to get up and running. So I always encourage you there. But I also encourage everyone to speak with a funding company. We work closely with a company called Benetrends, and they will do a full evaluation with you at no cost, looking at your different options, such as, can I use a retirement rollover, an SBA loan, which you talk quite a bit about, or even a home equity line of credit. They'll go through your different options, some things to think about. And they don't provide, every product. They'll provide retirement rollovers and SBAs and things like that, even assisting with unsecured loans. But if it's something like a home equity line of credit, they'll encourage you to speak with your bank and see kind of what the rates are, what the requirements are and things like that. So financials, if you come back and the numbers, 50,000 liquid, 100,000 net worth, and the SBA pre-approves you for a loan up to 200,000. Maybe we stay within that. And that obviously also reduces, right? Kind of narrows this search down for the first business. It also helps you figure out, okay, if we're, looking at 200,000, is that going to be enough for a brick and mortar type of business? Or should we stay more in the home-based service kind of area or industry? So things to think about, getting a full financial picture, looking at all the options. These options will also help you figure out the number of locations, the number of territories you're looking to explore. So financials are going to be big, and I encourage everyone, after having our first call and sending back the questionnaire, we always send an introductory email to Benetrends to do a full analysis of kind of your financials. Now we look at, the venue. The venue also is a big one here because this is where I kind of split the franchises in half. On one side, on the left side, you have home-based service businesses. What is that? Well, it's something that really could be a business that could be run from home. Maybe you're going to a business, maybe you're going to a homeowner and providing a service, business coaching. Maybe it's expense reduction. It's water and smoke mitigation. It could be mosquito spraying, roofing. Essentially, you don't need an office. Maybe you get one down the road, a flex space, an office with a warehouse. But essentially, the advantage here is, number one, you will be up and running in 1 to 3 months after signing the franchise agreement. And that's going to be dependent on your availability, the next training dates, and what is needed for the business. Are there trucks and equipment needed? Do you have to get vehicles wrapped? If not, you can get up and running sooner than later. But these businesses are not only up and running pretty quickly, the investment's going to be less. I would say a good area is about 100 to 250,000, depending on the business, the requirements. Is it a W-2 or 1099 labor model? There's so many different variables, but that gets you thinking about, hey, I do want to get up and running sooner than later. I may want to look at a home-based business to open up potentially an office outside the home, later on. Also, the idea of that lower investment works better for me. On the flip side, there's brick and mortar. And with brick and mortar, these are essentially, you need a location. Customers are coming to you, right? It's a completely different strategy. You do the marketing and the customer comes to you. So these could be gyms. It could be food prep, different venues around that, health and wellness, cryotherapy, IV nutrition, haircuts, facials, pedicures, tanning, waxing, you name it falls in this space. And these businesses, because they are a brick and mortar, that franchisor will usually provide a third party for a fee and find that right location for you. Because there's a location and there's a landlord, it's going to increase the time to get open. I would say 6 to 18 months, depending on the specific location, working with the landlord, and how simple, what's the build out look like specifically for that space. Maybe you have a gym franchise and there was already a gym in that space, so maybe a quicker build out time, permits and all that. So it really depends on the location where you fall in the country. 300 to 350,000 would be the average. Could it be less? Yes. Could it be more? Absolutely. But those are just some general ranges. And then you get into the standalone world where you're getting into trampoline parks and certain structure salon suites and things like that. And now you're getting into a much more robust, larger build out, standalone building. There's a lot more costs involved. You don't have to own the building. Some people do. Most people will lease. You're getting into a 7-figure investment, and I would say 1 to 2 years plus to get open. So they all have to fall within your comfort range. And sometimes that alone helps you scale back and say, you know what, for my first business, I want to be up and running sooner than later. And people go the service route. Other people are okay, opening up at a later date. But my job is not to tell you what's better or worse. My job is to tell you these are the things to expect when looking at these businesses. So we call it the venue, a different way of doing business. The clients and customers are coming to you. Bigger investment, it's going to take longer to get up and running. And those are things to consider, especially if you were recently laid off and maybe you need to generate income sooner than later. Maybe the home-based service business may be a better match. So that is another characteristic that we look at. And by the way, there is zero correlation between the investment and the return. The goal, I think, in my opinion, is finding the right match. And once you find the right match, I believe that business is going to be much more sustainable. You'll do much better because you enjoy the business, and it will excel on your skill sets, which is the next characteristic. And that characteristic is really what your role as the franchisee is going to be in the business. So the franchisee's role, and usually the franchisor is going to look for that transferable skill set. So if you were on Wall Street like myself, do you need investment strategy and financial planning to be able to run the business? No. But what that franchisor may be looking at was someone that could network and become the mayor of the town, someone that is great at management, which we see a lot in cleaning with larger number of staff. What is that skill set that you bring to the table? And, what does the average day in a life look like? Now, keep in mind, day one, the average day in a life is going to look much, much different than day 365 a year later. So day one is getting, learning the business, getting trained, getting up and running, finding the right staff. And then, after that first year, hopefully key staff is in place, revenue's been generated, hopefully some profits been generated as well, where you can kind of take a step back to see, okay, this is the role I want to take in the business. These are the areas I really enjoy, and I'm going to take that role and I'm going to hire out for the rest. So role is going to be a major part of it. Again, another characteristic helping you scale down in the business. And then there's other characteristics, and sometimes there is no preference, especially if you've never owned the business before, such as what do your employees look like? Kind of a crazy question. And what that means is essentially, are they W-2 employees where, you're paying them an hourly wage or salary, training them on every aspect of the business? Or are they a 1099 contractor where you're utilizing a roofer to replace a roof, an existing roofer, where they're bringing their own equipment and trucks and things like that? So definitely differences and pros and cons between a W-2 and a contractor. And we dive into those differences. What does that look like? Well, a contractor, you're going to have a lower investment simply because, you're not paying typically the contract until a job is awarded, completed, and paid for is when the contractor is getting paid. And those are some benefits, keeping the investment lower, and exactly, what the contractor is getting paid and what your margin is on the business. So another characteristic of the business, goals of the business. Are you looking to, grow the business as fast as possible and sell in a couple of years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, or is it to create a long-term legacy There are going to be some brands that will scale a little bit quicker. Others will have more of a membership model where you're slowly building this base of clients that become this annuity, right? This revenue stream. You start off with maybe you gain 10 customers a month. At the end of the year, you have over 100 customers that are paying you, that offering a service like maybe a mosquito spraying or pest control type of business where you're building and you're not, starting at zero every month. You know that you have these that revenue stream, that annuity is what I like to call it. So when you approach it that way, it's a completely different mind shift. But when you break these characteristics, like what's my comfortable investment? One other thing I didn't talk about in the investment also was the cash injection, right? I can get approved for 200,000, but what's my injection? Well, it's going to be just say 20%. So I'm okay putting $40,000 down in order to get the loan, to obtain the loan. My role in the business, where I'm located, my employees, what specifically they look like. Do I, as far as a contractor W-2, where am I located? Do I prefer that brick and mortar or something I can run from home? Once you, and sometimes you may be indifferent on these, but the goal is really to nail down and have some preferences there. Then we can go to work to see what brands are available in your market. Even just for fun, let's check to see if there are any resales available in your market. There may be someone that maybe they're retiring, something happened in life that's forcing them to sell. We just had we were just approached with a resale that due to a family member having some health issues, the franchisee had to sell and relocate different part of the country in order to help a family member. So, it's unfortunate, but that's the stuff that comes up that we're approached on and say, hey, we have a few resales in the market. Maybe that resale, maybe they were open a few years and you already have the team in place. You got revenue generated, potentially even a profit that you can take advantage of. And then you can weigh that, kind of weigh the pros and cons of a brand new franchise versus an existing business. You want to make sure you do your due diligence on the franchise brand as well as the resale. You're going to most likely pay a premium depending on how much income is coming in in profit. We call it seller discretionary earnings. What is that owner benefiting from the business? Net income, salaries, and pay, and everything else. So that's something that will be factored in. But you're going to still do the due diligence on the brand, because after that seller, you end up buying, just say their business, you will be getting coached and supported by the franchisor. So they're going to want to make sure that the fit's there. And I mean, shoot, I've had it where some people looked at a resale and added a brand new territory, and that's also possible as well. Again, it all goes back to the match. So when people ask me, what are your, what if you were me, what brands would you look at? It's like, well, if we've had our second call and really got into the characteristics, I'm going to bring 3 ideas to the table. Many times they're going to be very different to help you compare and contrast the brand. So when you approach it that way, the overwhelm goes away. The options go away because, half those brands may be brick and mortar of the 4,000. Now we're down to 2,000. That's great. Let's start narrowing the search. Our team here at Franchise, we have a back office staff. All they do is pre-screen companies. Now, this is not, doing the due diligence for you, but they're doing kind of a high level pre-screen to see if it's worth working with that specific franchise. Are they able to grow? What does that team look like? Interviewing the franchisor, the franchisee, reviewing their franchise disclosure document. And again, this is just a pre-screen. You are still responsible for your due diligence, but we can guide you with some questions to ask the franchisor, specifically, hey, the franchisor or the founder, CEO, they're the captain steering the ship. Where's this business going? What is the future of the brand look like? Are they adding revenue streams? Are they adding national accounts? From the franchisee validation side, we give sample questions such as, if you were to do this all over again, would you do it? Getting on those group calls, speaking with all franchisees that you can on these validations, but specifically someone that's in your situation. Maybe it's a franchisee that is running it part-time, just like your goal to keep the job for the first year and run it part-time. Great. Talk to those people. They, I'm sure, had their own challenges, own success stories. There's going to potentially be some additional expenses if they needed a general manager versus an owner operator, someone running it full-time. So this is where we spend a lot of time. Some people approach me and say, well, I want food. I'll ask, well, why do you want food? And usually it's a demand, right? Everyone has to eat every day. So then we dive into, great. check off that we want a high demand business, but do all the other boxes check off, like the number of employees, like the brick and mortar aspect, like the investment, et cetera, et cetera. And I've had people where they came back and said, you know what? I like the idea of food. I see the signage when I go to work. What else is out there? I prefer less staff. I prefer something home-based with high margins. And we may look at things like water and smoke, restoration and mitigation, and industries like that. We may look at expense reduction for small businesses. So the goal there is not to change your mind, but to educate you and dive a little bit deeper as to, why you want a food business. Well, really what you're saying is that you're looking for a business that has demand. In some cases, for myself, one of my main characteristics, actually, this is the first characteristics I focus on, which really, really, in my opinion, scaled down the list, was I want something recession resistant. I bought and opened my first franchise in 2007. I wanted something, I knew the economy wasn't looking good. I wanted something that could do well in that down economy. And we started exploring different options where, not saying we weren't affected, but there was definitely some opportunities that we took advantage of. And we talk in more detail about that. So again, the information's out there. You got, Entrepreneur Magazine, Jason Pfeiffer's top 500 list. If you want to look at brands, that may be a good start. But my challenge to you is, a lot of those brands may look great, but they may not be available in your market. They may not be registered in your state. They may be quadruple what you're looking to invest. So let's set aside 20 minutes. I set aside 20 minutes for every intro call, learn about you, your situation, how we can help, if decide together if a franchise is a good fit. And if it is, on that second call, that's where the magic happens. That's where we figure out the ideal business. Is this a legacy creation? Is this something you just want to potentially flip in 3 to 5 years? What does the ideal business look like? Are you going to be keeping your job and running the business on the side? Well, yeah, I mean, that's definitely an option, but not every franchisor will allow that. There may be ways around it if maybe the general manager owns a percentage of the business, but some will flat out say, we need you full-time that first year to really understand the business, because that's where we've seen a lot of success. We have this franchise avatar. This avatar was built over the last couple of years of people that have done really well in the system. So that's really what I challenge for you today, is to figure out why you want the franchise. What does this business look like? And we spent a lot more time than we did today going through these characteristics, because part of it is an open conversation. We want to have this back and forth, and and those conversations essentially create other questions and ideas, and open your mind up to different ideas of businesses that you could potentially run. So that's my, when people ask what's a franchise and what are the franchises out there, that's how I answer it. To touch on what other franchises are out there, as I mentioned, you got the different brick and mortar and you have the home-based service. But if you can think of a business with 4,000 brands, and I think in 70 plus industries, there's a franchise out there. There's things that are different. Jet detailing, working in airplane hangars, pet waste removal, both residential and commercial, working with the HOAs and things like that, helping after a cleanup after a fire, a flood or natural disaster, executive recruitment, expense reduction, business coaching, all the way to food and health and wellness. As I mentioned, there's so many different opportunities, and you want to make sure that you want to be excited about the opportunity, the product or service, but you also want to make sure it matches all the characteristics. You want to make sure to review the financials of the franchisor and franchisee to make sure the fit's there. You want this to be profitable, so that when you're looking at all the FDDs, the franchise disclosure documents, and maybe you're stuck between 3 brands and you really want to focus on financials, well, you'll be creating pro formas. You'll look at the items 5, 6, and 7 to help you create the initial investment and pro forma range. There may be there's going to be an item 19, so you'll get to look at franchisee financials and returns, and really talk with the franchise owners to ask how their first year was, how profitable they were. That really also helps you figuring out how many territories you may want to acquire or locations. So a lot of exciting stuff there, and we could definitely talk for much longer than this, but that really lays the groundwork. And when people say, I don't know where to start, this is where to start. If a franchise or a business, may be that right fit for you, get your financials in order, let the family know, get everyone on board as to what you're doing, and really start ironing out. And you can just jot down these characteristics and notes, and then we'll go through that together. And sometimes we have to make tweaks. Sometimes we have to make changes. Sometimes you're laser focused. You know exactly what this business looks like, and we go to work finding the opportunities in your market. So I appreciate the questions. I hope this helps at least one person. And if you could think of someone that may benefit from this show, please like and subscribe. Share this with one individual that maybe they just lost their job, one individual that's been talking about business ownership forever and just didn't know where to start. I just ask one small favor. If you share this with someone, I greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate your support, your comments. You know, we're on all social networks, TikTok, Instagram, we're on YouTube, and I gather all that information and comments. We try to respond to all, engage, and utilize that feedback in the comments for these future episodes. So thanks again, everyone, for your support. This was fun. Definitely have a lot more topics to discuss. Open to your comments. And if you're ready to have that conversation and dive right in, go to the website, ggthefranchiseguide.com/calendar. You can also book a call, top right-hand side of the corner of the website. We'll give you a few questions, kind of what we talked about, figuring out if you're a good fit for a franchise, and you'll be given spoiler alert, maybe this is a surprise, but we'll give you a copy of our book. We'll email right in your inbox, and you'll get to book a 20-minute call with me. So looking forward to it. Again, appreciate everyone's support. Can't wait to get the comments on this one. And if you have an idea for a future episode, or you want to come on the show or have a guest recommendation, feel free to share. Again, I really appreciate everything, and looking forward to chatting soon. Take care, everyone. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn how to make the transition from corporate to owning your franchise, join Giuseppe on the next episode. You can also follow on all social media platforms and achieve financial and time freedom today.